Hi there, it's Patricia Finney, or P.F. Chisholm again, and this time I'm talking about why. Why were the borders, the Anglo-Scottish borders, so awful? Why were people so fierce? Why did they fight so much? Why did they raid each other? The answer to that is quite simple, really. Effectively, the border area was at war or being raided or in some way had problems from 1513 to about 1550, right the way through. And there were three major eruptions, as it were. One was in 1513, that was, as any Scot will know, the Battle of Flodden. It's often said that after the Battle of Flodden, the English didn't do much damage. They did. They did do a lot of damage. They burned, they pillaged, they stole, they murdered all the way across the borders. After Solway Moss, another battle which Scots lost it. Sorry, they lost Flodden. They lost Solway Moss. Solway Moss, more burning, more pillaging. But perhaps the worst worst year or two, was 1544, which was when Henry VIII decided that the best thing for everybody would be if his nice little boy, Edward, aged 5, was to marry the deceased Scottish King, James V's daughter, Mary, who had just been born. Now, this was perfectly normal. You know, you'd have babies marrying each other throughout the royal houses of Europe. And essentially, in pursuit of this lovely marriage, Henry VIII burned, or his lieutenants, burned, pillaged, robbed, all the way across. They actually hit Edinburgh from Leith, from the port of Leith, and burned it. They came south, and then essentially they raped, they murdered, they pillaged, they burned. And this is always described as laying waste. Laying waste, which has a bit of an ominous sound. But for somebody who's living there on the ground, this means soldiers arriving at the dead of night and burning your house, very often with you in it. And if you went out to try and do something about it, you'd be killed. And they would steal all your horses, your cattle, everything you had. And if you didn't die from that, well, you'd probably die of starvation or disease later on. And we really live very easy lives in comparison. There's more explosive around and armies can move faster. So in some ways, it's worse for civilians in a war nowadays. But in other ways, it's a bit better, because this just went on, and the burning continued, and there was no help. There was no United Nations to send food and money and medical supplies. That was it. If your harvest was burned by a bunch of happy English soldiers, or Scottish soldiers sometimes, that was it. You were going to die of starvation. Unless you could go over the border and steal somebody else's harvest. That was always a good idea. So it was really 40 years of incessant fighting, burning, stealing, murdering. And it's not surprising. It's really not surprising that the English and the Scottish borderers became very tough and hardy people. And they became very good fighters. They were absolutely forced to do it. So in the 1550s and the 1560s, after Elizabeth got on the throne, after Mary became queen, things got quietened down a bit on the major political front. But as far as the raiding was concerned, well, they'd got used to it by then. They liked it. They did a lot of it, and they did it to each other, and they did it across the border, and they did it along the border. And so by 1592, you'd had very nearly 100 years of this sort of thing. And then we're surprised that that they were rough, tough people. Well, of course they were. They had to be. So that's basically it. I will go into more detail about what was going on in my various talks. I hope you'll come to see them. And this is Patricia Finney and Pierre Chisholm saying goodbye.